Welcome back from lunch, friends. Let's go ahead and do this machine learning designer pipelines thing together. So the way I would say let's do this is if you guys want to put this is a classification and this is a clustering. If you guys just want to tell me what to do and how to do this, I don't know if you guys had a chance to do this over your lunch. If not, totally get that. Again, if you want to move it, you will have to make a copy of it. So I'm actually going to do that just to show. Let's make a copy of entire presentation. That way I don't actually copy our template. Cool. So now that I've made a copy, if you guys want to say, what's the first thing for my classification? What's the first thing I have to do? For this, what's the first thing I've got to do when I'm dealing with a classification?
Start with the data. So the diabetes data.
Yeah, you always got to start with data. Great job. Always got to start with the data. If we don't have data, we can't do anything, right? I can't create any sort of model. I can't do any sort of machine learning. Awesome. Now what's the next piece here?
You want to train it first, right? Oh, no, wait, sorry. Logistic regression.
Logistic regression is gonna be what I use before so I have my data, and we also know it as data transformations, but what's something else I need to do to my data?
Normalize data?
Yeah, exactly. I have to take my data and I have to normalize it. Remember when we talked about having large numbers, I have to make sure those are taken care of. I've got to clean my data. So this should actually be called, I'm going to rename this to data transformation, because normalizing data is part of that, right? Cool. So I've got my data, I've cleaned it, I've selected which columns I want to use, I've normalized it. Now, what do we got here, Riley?
Logistic regression.
Yeah. Which one? Is it on this side or this side?
On the right side.
Not quite on the right.
Oh, yeah. No, on the left. Sorry.
Left. Yeah. So it's going to be right here, right? I'm choosing my model and I'm still dealing with my data. So what do I want to do here?
Split the data.
Yeah. I want to split it, right? What am I going to split it into? Do you remember?
To score model, I would say.
Well, I split it into it's kind of a trick question. It's called a test train split. So I'm splitting it into a portion that I want to train my model on. And then after that, I want to take that other testing part and I want to use it to score my model. But way to go. Okay. So I've picked which module I want to use. I have my training data now. What do I need to do next?
Evaluate model. No.
You train it.
Yeah, exactly. I need to train it. Great job. Oops. Great job, guys. I have to train it. I've used which module I want to use to train it, and I've got my data in my training data. So I've done that. Next, after I train my data, what do I do?
Evaluate it.
Not quite. I score it. Scoring, and this is a little bit of a confusing thing. Scoring is taking my trained model, comparing it on data it hasn't seen, right? And so I'm actually using my model on the data I haven't seen. And once I do that, I evaluate how good my model's done on data it hasn't seen. So I take in my data, I transform it, I split it into my test train split. I identify which module I want to use or which machine learning algorithm basically I want to use. I then take my training data and I take my module and I train my model using this algorithm and using my test data. I then take this trained model and I take my data that I set aside to test and I use my trained model on the data it hasn't already seen. And then I take a score of that model, right? And so that's me. The score model is basically me taking my data that it hasn't seen and using my trained model on it. And then after that, I evaluate and see how good did it do. And that's my evaluation. Good job. Now, next one, this one's a little bit more, this is a clustering. This is a little bit more out. Well, I'll give you this last one. What's the first thing I have to do?
Data.
Yeah, I got to get my data. Good job. I got to get my Penguin data. And then what? So this one, I had data transformations and there was 3 pieces, right? This one is more piece by piece by piece. So what's the first thing I have to do in my data transformation?
Clean the
Select
data.
your columns.
Yeah, I select my columns actually. Good job. So I select my columns first. If I can grab it, there we go. Then I heard it. Then I clean my data. And then after I clean my data, what do I do with it? Yeah,
Normalize
somebody
it.
put- Yeah, normalize it. Way to go. Then I've now got 3 left. And so this is what it would look like on the exam. So it'll maybe give you all of these and then it'll have these 3 empty and say, take these and drag them. So that's why we're doing it this way. Okay, so I normalize my data. Now what do I want to do? Think about this guy. After we did our data transformations,
Split.
yeah, I want to split my data into my test train split. Now this is clustering. So when I identify which module I want to use, which module was for our clustering.
Key means.
Yeah, k-means, that's what we saw visually, right? We saw how that works with our centroids. And then lastly, I train my clustering, remembering that with a clustering, because it's unsupervised, we don't really have any sort of evaluation metrics. So once it clusters, because there's no right or wrong, right? So I don't need to score it. I don't need to evaluate it because there is no right or wrong. It just is using our k-means to find patterns within our data. And then I'm going to assign data to clusters. So I say, okay, this data is part of this cluster. This cluster is using TikTok. So this person's going to get advertisements via TikTok, something like that. Good job. Cool. Great. Now let's move on to what I think is the most fun part of the day. And we're going to learn all about different things. We're going to learn about computer vision. And we're going to have, we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll have a break. Oftentimes it's so fascinating. This is not a joke. So fascinating. People want to dive in even more. Then we've got conversational AI. I have an hour set aside and I keep meaning to change this. I think it takes maybe a 15-minute conversation. So I don't know why I have an hour set aside. Then if we have time, we'll do a knowledge check, which is a fun game, which I think would be fun with this group. And then we'll talk about next steps. So let's move into computer vision. So computer vision, which we talked about earlier back in the day, or earlier today, when we talked about AI, is us actually using image classification or using a computer to see different things within an image. So within our computer vision, there are some tasks associated to computer vision. And the first one is image classification, where it involves training a machine learning model to classify images based on their content. So here's an image. It classifies it as a taxi, right? So for example, in a traffic monitoring solution, you might use image classification models to classify images based on the type of vehicle they contain, such as taxis, buses, cyclists, and so on. Another task of computer vision would be object detection. So that is a machine learning model that are trained to classify individual aspects within an image. So this was the overall image, right? And this is, okay, I want an image, but I want different aspects, different categories or different pieces of my image. So in this case, on the right, you see a car, a bus, and cyclists, right? So what it will do with object detection is it gives something called a bounding box. And this bounding box is these boxes right here, and says within that is a car, a bus, and a cyclist. So remembering that object detection gives a bounding box of our actual object to identify their location within our image. Now, if I did semantic segmentation, that is an advanced machine learning technique that actually takes, instead of the bounding box of car, you can see in this, it still has pieces of the road, the little like lane pieces, part of a light, you know, if a cyclist was closer, it might have part of a tree. With semantic segmentation, it's a more advanced piece where it actually has every pixel of the image that is associated to car is blue, but nothing outside of that, right? So it's really identifying. I don't know if you've seen any of there's like all over Instagram and the news and Reddit, is Tesla will literally, if you're sitting there and somebody's walking, on the screen, a body will come up, right? And it is how they're walking. And then it will see that a passenger is walking in front of it, right? It doesn't show a box and it doesn't just show a big block thing. It actually shows the person as they're walking. You can sort of think about that as semantic segmentation, right? It doesn't just have the bounding box. It is just the image or the thing we're trying to classify is blue or red or green, nothing outside of that. Computer vision also allows us to do image analysis. So we can have an image, and then actually it will look at the image and give a sentence of what is happening. Now it can do stuff like tags, right? So if I wanted to have a bunch of images, let's say I'm like Shutterfly or something that gives free images out there. I don't know what a free image is. And I wanted to create tags so that way, if somebody wanted to use this for their website, maybe there's a subscription, but they can use anything they want. They can Google dogs, and every image that has a dog in there will show up. And so with computer vision, instead of somebody having to look at every image and type every little label that is like, human, dog, taxi, building, city, street, right? The image will actually do it on its own. And so you can see with this image analysis, it says a person with a dog on a street, right? Just by viewing that, it can create and summarize the scene shown in the image. Computer vision can also do face detection analysis and recognition. So face detection is a specialized form of object detection, and it specifically locates human faces in an image. And this can be combined with classification and facial geometry analysis techniques to infer details such as age and emotional state, and even recognize individuals based on their facial features. This is incredible technology, but when we're talking about responsible AI, this is a really important technology that we have to be aware of, right? Where this might sound good if for some reason, where you can do age, emotional state, you can infer other things too. But if those are used poorly, whether it is somebody's ethnicity and you are, working at NFL stadium, right? And you have a bias and discriminate against one ethnicity. If somebody's there and it detects that person, you have to pull them aside to make sure, like, really check them. That's an abuse of your power. So we have to make sure that we are abuse of the technology, and it's not being responsible, right? In fact, it's not inclusive and it is not fair. And that's not a great use of our technology. So again, with these things, there are some really beautiful things we can create, but there are some things that are really big issues for these. Computer vision also allows us to do something called optical character recognition, which is OCR. So basically I can submit a photo and it will read out words that are in that photo, and it'll give me those words. Apple just came out with something very similar to where I can take my phone, I could do a screen and I can click it, and it will get all of the words in that. Actually, there's a funny TikTok where students are cheating because maybe they're late to class and they didn't take any notes. They just are taking pictures of people's screens, and then this is taking all those words and immediately putting it onto some sort of text, right? And you can start thinking where that could go bad, where all of a sudden, if I am just taking pictures of a 300-page textbook that costs $600, well, if I can just take all of that and then somebody just takes a picture and then makes a Word document, now this book which college books are way overpriced, don't get me started, but this book that everybody usually has to pay $600, now, somebody can sell it for $25 and you just print it off. And, I print it off for, maybe it cost me $6 to print and I sell it for 30 versus 600, or I sell it for 80. Well, somebody's saving a bunch of money by having those same things. I don't have to type it or anything, right? I don't have to scan it. I just take a picture, it reads it, puts all the words in a document, and then you're good to go. I mean, it's illegal, but here we are. So computer vision has a ton of different pieces, and there's 4 different types of computer vision that we're going to talk about. And what I will say is, one of the big benefits of Azure and computer vision is it will have all of this stuff out of the box already built for you, already very accurate. So there is ways that we can create our own computer vision and train models to recognize, do different things. And that's where custom vision will come in. But what's nice is, let's say that I wanted to create that same sort of thing of, I wanted to create an app that when I take a picture of an old building or a popular building, I will know, I can get more information on it. Well, I could technically train a model and create an application and train a model of every important building or every large building around the world, or the majority of them, multiple different angles. Or I could just use this computer vision tag, and out of the box, I can, make an application in 2 weeks versus a 2-year process. And we'll talk about that too. So with computer vision, this is a service that Azure provides. So this is, again, talking more specifically to Azure, is you can use their service of computer vision to analyze images and videos, extract descriptions, tags, objects, and text. So if we're not going to actually take 5 minutes individually, but we'll just look, right? Where I can analyze and describe images. What it will do is computer vision, I give it this image, and this is the tags that it creates, where there's trees, and it gives a confidence level. So maybe my application says if it's, less than, 73% confident, then I don't want to have that as a tag. But here you've got 100% confidence there's a tree, 99% confidence it's outdoors, 98% confidence that there's a skyscraper, 97% confidence there's water. So just by this image, this has been trained to take in the images and spit out tags. It spits out a city with tall buildings and trees, which is 29% confident of that. That's just a description of that. And what's also interesting is, let's say we are creating a tool that people can upload photos, but I want to prevent it from having racy or adult content. I can actually use computer vision and say, if it is 85% confident, or whatever the percentage is, that there is adult content, but this is like a kid's application, I want that off, right? I don't want any sort of ability for an adult to upload some sort of adult content sort of thing. So out of the box, this already is built and trained. Now, just knowing that in order for us to create something this accurate, it takes a massive amount of funding, because it takes a massive amount of energy and computing power in order to do this. And so, yes, and this is a big benefit of the cloud, is yes, you do more subscription based, right? You're paying for something versus like you building something, and then no longer really having to pay for it, but maintain. You are paying for it. But the money that Microsoft has put into these different tools is so heavy that, most companies aren't going to be able to compete with how good these computer vision or NLPs or, conversational AI bots are. So it's just better to pay for that, because it's cheaper in the long run, because the money to actually make something as good, if not better, is going to be much, much higher than just you doing a subscription service. It's very similar to why people just go to the cloud anyway, versus having their own servers. Again, with computer vision, you can submit this and it will give you a transcript where it says it has a number 42, it has street, and it has the number 42 again. You can read handwriting and imagery. That's what we were talking about with the Apple. Like if you take out your iPhone, and if you have one and you do your picture, I'm sure Android does that as well, and you can actually see that, right? So now I can take a picture of maybe a recipe that my mother has made that's in her handwriting, and I want to save it forever. I can do that and then upload it to the cloud. And now even if I lose that piece of paper, I still actually have this family recipe idea, even though it was handwritten. I can use a cloud to do that. And what's another cool thing is that you can actually, it is actually already created, right? It already has 9,000 landmarks around the world and over 200,000 celebrities. So if you did like, who's that celebrity? And somebody posted a picture, it'll be able to detect that, right? So that's the Statue of Liberty. This is the CEO of Microsoft, right? And so it will be able to, you can upload something and it will tell you with confidence that this is the Golden Gate Bridge. So it already has this built in. This would have been great. I have an embarrassing story. I spent a year studying economics in England, business and economics. And while I was over there, I had a layover in Barcelona, and I had never really, learned anything about, I'm American. So, our education on other countries is very minimal. It's a very big downfall of America. But while I was there, all these people, I just had 5 hours. So I said, I'm just going to take a bus into some city and it's going to be awesome. And with that, I'm going to just walk around, and it was in Barcelona. So I said, I'm going to take a bus into Barcelona and let's just walk around and see what the, let's see like the Gaudi architecture. Let's do other things. All these people were walking to this area and there's like a massive amount of people. So I said, okay, I'm going to go wherever they're going. So I followed them. I got to this large building and I was like, wow, this building is incredible. This building is beautiful, but I have no idea what it is. And it was, I mean, there were tons of people taking pictures, and I walked up to, a lady that was selling tickets to go inside. And I said, hey, this is really beautiful. What is this building? And she was so offended because I had no idea what the building was. And if any of you guys know, it was Sagrada Familia. And it is this incredible building. So I walk up and this is what I'm seeing. And I had no idea what it was, right? And I was just, I didn't have internet at the time. This was years and years ago. But it was this incredible building. But if I would have had this tool, I, A, wouldn't have offended somebody, and B, wouldn't have looked like an idiot, because I could have just taken a picture and it would have shown me this is the unfinished church. That's, what the idea, that's like the nickname of it, right? Because it's been being built for hundreds of years. And so instead of me having to go through that, I could have taken a picture, and that could have saved me a lot of embarrassment. But alas, here we are. So computer vision does allow those things, which is awesome. So, and this is going to be a statement that I say a lot here. And this is because for the exam, it'll ask you these questions, and I'll give you a little bit of a secret for the certification. When we're dealing with different tools that Azure provides, there's multiple ways you can use that tool. The first one is let's say I work at a company and I want to create an application and I want to use computer vision. Well, I can just pay for computer vision. You can sort of think about it like an a la carte, right? Where I'm just paying computer for what I'm using and I don't need to pay for anything else. So I can pay for just computer vision. Now, let's say that I wanted to use computer vision and another tool, which we'll see here in a bit. If I wanted to use computer vision and maybe a text analytics or a translator text, then I'd want to use something called cognitive services. And we're going to see this a lot. Cognitive services is basically the overarching everything service that you can use. And it's basically you're paying for cognitive services, but you have access to everything. So that's like the whole meal, right? That's like you buying the entire menu, versus computer vision is just specifically using computer vision. Now, if on the exam, it says, let's say that your organization wants to use computer vision and text analytics or and something else, which service would you want to use? It's always going to be cognitive services. And we're going to see here how cognitive services is, and every single one, it'll typically say in cognitive services. But just knowing that, if the question did say, if your company just wants to utilize computer vision, you can just use computer vision. You don't have to pay for everything else. In order for computer vision to work, it's really, really easy to implement these things. All you need is a key. So you think about like an API key, if you guys have ever used that. Basically, this is going to authenticate client applications. It's going to tell Microsoft that it is your account that is using this. So every time maybe a user uses computer vision or you use computer vision, it's telling Microsoft it's on your account. So if there's, depending on their pricing or whatever structure you have, they will bill you accordingly. And then just an endpoint that provides the HTTP address to where your resource can be accessed. So it's very, very simple. You just need a key in order to utilize the tool, and then an endpoint to say, this is where it's going to come from, and this is what I want you to deliver to this area. Now it can describe, again, computer vision can describe an image. So it can give you multiple descriptions. It has the ability to analyze an image and evaluate the objects that are detected. This is all within computer vision. It can create tags, right, of skyscrapers and buildings and towers. And there's a ton, and like thousands, it says, of recognizable objects, which can be used for the tag. So it can generate those for you. It can also do detection, right? It gives a bounding box of detecting objects. So it does say, okay, this is a building, this is a building, this is a tower. But you'll receive a set of coordinates that indicate sort of the top, the left, top, the left, the width, and the height of the object. So that way, if you were going to do something with that and you needed that information, you had basically the bounding box of where that image lives. So if you wanted to transform or do something of that nature, you totally can. You can sort of think about that as Google came out with it's like a magic eraser sort of thing, where if you take a picture and somebody else is in the background, you can click it and it gets rid of it. So sort of the same idea, right? Where this tool will take whatever you don't want, identify where it's at, and then, do something with it. In this case, it takes it and replaces it. Computer vision, and these are all out of the gate. Computer vision can also detect brands. So maybe you input a video, you're doing YouTube or something. You want to make sure that you don't have a brand in there that can sue you or that's against your contract. Let's say you're Coca-Cola sponsored and you want to make sure that there's like no Pepsi products within your video or within your images. It can do that too. And it's got a database of thousands of globally recognized logos. Of all sorts of things. So, you put this and then they'll say, oh, this is 68% confident that this is a Microsoft tablet, right? Or Microsoft thing. Yeah, you would think that Azure itself would know with 100% what Microsoft logo is. It's kind of funny. But yeah, there you go. It does have tons of brands. Again, this is all out of the box. You don't have to do anything other than just implement this tool. It can detect faces. There's going to be another tool that you can use if you really wanted to use like facial recognition, but it does have the ability to detect faces. You can think about it as way back in the day. Maybe maybe you guys don't remember this, but do you remember back when Facebook allowed you to tag your friends and it just had a bounding box on this face? And then it got to a point where, it would actually suggest, oh, do you want to tag Will in this photo? And you were like, how the heck do they know that, right? But they were learning faces based off of bounding boxes. And then on each tag, you would hover over and there was a bounding box of a face of me or of, somebody else, which is kind of crazy. So computer vision can do that. Let's say you did want to allow users to update photos of friends and it, for you wanted it to run through your computer vision and detect a face and then maybe say, do you want to tag this person in this photo, right? It will allow you to do that. And you can categorize images based on their content. So it uses something called a parent-child hierarchy with a current limited set of categories. Now these tools are often evolving and getting better and better and better. And so, again, we can create our own thing, but this is already, light years ahead of anything we can create at the moment. So utilizing something like computer vision is really cool. And then again, it can detect domain specific content. Now this computer vision is specifically out of the box. I can take a picture of that church and then it would have told me what it was. Now I can use that tool. I couldn't back in the day. So it does have celebrities and it does have landmarks. It has optical character recognition. So the tool of computer vision does provide that. I can take a picture and it will tell me what is written. And in order to use that, let's say I did want to use that to where I wanted people to be able to create notes off of images, right? Taking a picture of other people's notes, or, I went to college and I hated how much I spent on books. So therefore I'm creating an application that's against the rules and allowing people to create, books based off of images. Well, the OCR API, so optical character recognition, is really designed for images that have sort of limited lines of text. So something like courage, yes, that's great. Or, the one where we saw the bank or the 42nd Street. If we're dealing with something that has lots of actual words, right, then I want to use something like a read API. Like, let's say I had a screenshot or an image of a book. Let's say I just scanned all these images or all these pages of a book into a document. If I wanted to really go through and get every word from that book, then I would actually use something called the read API. And that's optimized for images that have a significant amount of text or has a considerable, it's called visual noise, right? So if there's a lot more going on there, I'd use the read API. So it's better for like scan documents that have a lot of text, and it automatically determines the proper recognition model to use. So taking into consideration lines of text and supporting images with printed text, as well as recognizing handwriting. So it does a lot more. So you can always just think of, if you have a lot of text, you want to use the read API. If you use just a little bit, the OCR API is totally doable. Totally good. Cool. Yeah, we just talked about that. Additional capabilities for computer vision. And this is the product of computer vision that we can use from Azure, is it can detect image types. So identifying if clip art images or line drawings, it can detect image color schemes, it can generate thumbnails, and it can moderate content. Again, let's say I create an application that I want to make sure that it's a children's application for learning, and I want to make sure that no adult content, but it's like crowdsourced. I want to make sure no adult content goes on there. I can moderate content by using this, and it can get rid of any gory, violent, or adult content. So that's out of the box computer vision. What I can use right now, if you were to create an Azure account, you can go in, you can use computer vision, and you can create applications that use that right now. But let's say I wanted to create something that I wanted to create a service that I tapped into my Ring doorbell. And every time one of my friends came, let's say I'm creating this kind of cool application, or I'm creating my own Ring doorbell. And anytime one of my friends came, it automatically let them in, or it gave them a funny message. Well, I would have to train that on, I would have to use custom vision in order to train that on my custom friends, or my friends' images, or my specific thing I'm trying to accomplish. In order to use custom vision, again, I can use cognitive services, where I can have cognitive services is everything, or I could just use custom vision. That's all I want to use. Let's say for this example, I just want to train it for just my subset of friends. I could just use custom vision and not pay extra for everything else. So in order for me to use custom vision, I need a project ID. So I would create a project and create a unique ID for that. I'd create a model name. So I'd have to create my model that we had already talked about. I'd create a prediction endpoint and a prediction key. Again, where you're going to make that prediction and what that prediction key is going to do. But just know that when you are training a classification model, let's say it's a group of friends and you just have, 5 friends. And so this image is either one of those or not. You have to upload images to your training source and label them with the appropriate class labels. So you would have to upload every single image of your friend, and then you would have to label each one. So it's a lot heavier of a workload. Then you have to train the model and evaluate training results. But when we're training something like this, like an image recognition, it is really important to remember that we can't just take, 3 photos, from like this view, and then it's going to expect it to detect, right? We have to take photos from all around. Like whenever you create Face ID for Apple, you have to move your phone all around. It's because it wants to get your face at different angles, right? And so at different times of day, whether it's dark or it's light outside, you have to do so much. You have to have so much range for it to really accurately predict your friends, that just knowing that if we did want to use custom vision, it is a much more intensive than, something like computer vision out of the box. But if we did want it for something specific, like just detecting my friends, computer vision is not going to do that. Has no idea who my friends are. But I do need quite a few images in order for me to really, really, really have that. Or for it to actually be accurate, especially if I'm doing something like unlock my house every time they come over, something of that. You have to have tons of images to have a higher confidence level. So that way it's not just anybody can pass it. There is a tool called Face. So there's a couple of different things for facial analysis. You can use computer vision. You can use video indexer, which allows you to detect and identify faces in a video. And then you can also use, sounds such a funny name, it's just called Face. So that offers pre-built algorithms that can detect, recognize, and analyze faces. So your computer vision is your more generic facial detection, some basic face analysis, such as determining age. Video indexer is really if you're just wanting something in a video. And then Face is going to be your more intense way that you can detect and recognize and analyze faces. So Face currently supports the following functionality. It does face detection, face verification. It finds similar faces. It will group faces based on similarities, and it helps identify people. So if I did want to create, let's say I'm creating an IoT for security, and I wanted to, I work at a bank and only certain amount of people are allowed in my in the vault, right? It's only their face. It's not a code or anything or a key card. It's just their face. Well, what I could do is I could create something that uses a camera that basically takes an image, right? Takes the image of my face, then it would run it through my algorithm, use face verification, and then verify that it's me, and then open up the bank, something of that nature. So it will verify, it can do face detection, find similar faces, and then group faces based on similarities if you want to do that. And if you wanted to identify people, it also allows that. For face, if you wanted to use that, again, out of the box, you could just use face. You would just, if you just wanted to use face and that's it, you would use face. And if you wanted to use cognitive services, if you wanted to use face and computer vision, you can absolutely do that as well. One thing to think about is, and here's kind of a silly thing, but when we're thinking about from a business perspective, you know, it might make sense. If you're a large company, why wouldn't you just always do cognitive services? Well, some different parts of your organization might have different budgets to where cognitive services as a whole might be a larger bill, right? And so in one organization, even though it's all within the same company, one organization might say, I don't want to pay this higher price because all I'm wanting to use is face, or all I'm wanting to use is text analytics. And so I'm just going to use text analytics, even though from the overall company perspective, it doesn't save money. Sometimes organizations don't care about that. They just care about their own personal budget within that company because that's what their job is. So just some ideas of thinking through that. In order to use face, you need a key that is used to authenticate client applications and an endpoint. So it's very, very simple to implement this. And then lastly is form recognizer. And this is what we talked about earlier today, where it's a pre-built receipt model out of the box. So let's say that your company has a bunch of salespeople and they go out and take people out to lunch, and you want to be able to track their spending habits and see, you know, which salesperson is actually spending the most. What are they spending the most on? Is it food? Is it alcohol? What is it? This is just out of the box. They take a receipt and it gets all the information from the receipt and goes and does whatever you ask it to do, whether it's adding it to a total or putting it to a dashboard, or, you know, if you wanted to make some sort of data visualization to see, you know, tracking from a data point each month or each week, how much they are spending. So you can see any sort of trends. If they're starting to spend a lot more, you can sort of figure out what's going on. As always, form recognizer, you can do that in a form recognizer resource or cognitive services. And it's really kind of cool. What you can do is it's a pre-built receipt model. And so it's designed to recognize common receipts in English that are common to the USA. And so with that, let's say you have a receipt at a restaurant. What it will do is you take a picture of it. It will take the time of transaction, the date of transaction, the merchant info, the taxes paid, receipt totals, and then other pertinent information that might be visible. So like, what did you buy? Right? What was the actual thing that you paid for? In this case, like a Surface Pen and then a Surface Pro, right? And then all text on the receipt is recognized as well and returned as well. So if I wanted to, again, maybe associate, this is technology, this is food, and this is alcohol, I could eventually do that because all the text out of the box is there, right? And so it's just a quick tool that I could build and then maybe be able to start tracking how much my salespeople are spending. When we are uploading images, and this was one of the exam questions, is when we're uploading images, they must be in a JPEG, PNG, BMP, PDF, or TIFF format. The question was, what is the maximum number that a form recognizer image can be? And it'd be 50 megabytes. And then the other one was the image size must be between how many pixels, and it's 50 by 50 pixels and 10,000 by 10,000 pixels. So, or for a PDF, it's no longer than 17 by 17. So those were, wanted to put these in there because those were things that we did see on the exam. And just so you know, if you wanted to out of the box mess with this, there's a free tier subscription plan for the receipt model along with paid subscriptions. So for the free tier, only the first 2 pages will be processed when passing in a PDF and TIFF. What's really cool after this is if you want to go dive in and use any of these tools, if you haven't already set up an Azure account, you can. And I think you get $200 in credits for free. So let's say you did want to use computer vision and you messed with it and built it. And then you sort of racked up a bill of like $100 because you're using these tools. Well, Azure gives it to you, gives you $200 for free. So just make sure you turn it off after you build that. That way you don't keep getting charged. Any question on computer vision and the things that out of the box Microsoft Azure can do? Cool. Well, we'll move forward to natural language processing. I know this is a long day. So sorry about this, friends. We're almost there. I'm hoping this works so bad because this is the coolest one. No! Why does the world hate me today? Thanks, Winter. This one's on Luis. Sorry, friends. If it works for you, then I know that you guys have the link. I'm not sure why. I'll put the link there. I have no idea why it's not opening up. I've never had this issue until today. Here's the link to the actual video. If you guys can watch it, it's a really cool video on NLPs, natural language processing, and the things that, you know, out of the box this can do. And it's really, really, really fascinating. But we'll continue. We'll just continue on. Sorry about this. I don't know why none of these videos. We're actually going to do this as a group. Try to think of as many things that we use that encounter in our lives and rely on natural language processing. So does anybody have any examples of something we use maybe every day or weekly, or something you have used in your life that uses something called natural language processing? And natural language processing is like speech to speech, speech to text. Yeah, Siri would be a great example. Cortana, yeah. Another great example. Things like Alexa, things like, yeah, I've never heard of Bixby, but things like Alexa, things like,
Would that be like the phone
Yeah.
apps where you say like, what's your social security? And it gets it from your voice?
so yeah, there's a piece of that, right? Where it's going to do like a speech to text, right? Because there is a product that is listening and taking in from your voice that information. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Speech recognition to automate the call. There's a ton of different ways that we use NLPs. There's a million different ways. And so for NLP for Azure, and this is one of my favorite tools I think out there, is there are, for NLPs, there's something called text analytics, translator text. And after we go through these, you'll see that it's actually everywhere that you are. Even right now, I have closed captioning on for Zoom, and that is processing what I'm saying. And it's what we call speech to text. So it's processing what I'm saying and then putting it on the screen, right? Text analytics, there's translator text, speech, and then language understanding intelligence service, which is Luis. We'll go through all of those here. So text analytics allows us to analyze text where we process and evaluate different aspects of a document or phrase in order to gain insights to the contents of that text. So for the most part, humans are able to read text and understand it, or understand the meaning behind it. But actually this, is really difficult for computers to understand sarcasm, to understand tone, to understand grammar rules for a certain language is very, very hard, right? And so text analytics is a cognitive service that can help simplify application development by using pre-trained models. And so these models are already able to detect and determine the language of a document or text. They can perform sentiment analysis on text to determine a positive or negative sentiment. They can extract key phrases from that text that might indicate its main talking points, and it can identify and categorize entities in the text Entities can be places or organizations or even everyday items such as dates, times, quantities, and so on. So we've got a group activity here. It's called text analytics. Would you guys prefer to do this as a group activity, or would you, oh yeah, I guess we do need to do it as group activity. Or would you rather walk through what this is? Do you guys, what's better for you guys? Do you like diving in to group activities, or would you rather walk through this as a whole? Okay. So with text analytics, there's four main things that we've got. We've got language detection, we've got sentiment analysis, we have key phrase extraction, and we have entity recognition. So with language detection, what it does is, and I'll copy this, put this in the chat, because this is what we're going to be walking through. Is if we're looking at language detection, it does a couple things, right? It detects which language is being spoken. So here I've got three different reviews. So there's three different, let's say, sentences. A fantastic place for lunch. The soup was delicious. And then it has two different ones. And the third one's really unique, right? So this is in English. This is in Spanish. And then here you think if we have a review, it says the croque monsieur avec frites was terrific. Bon appetit. And what it does is it actually reads this, and although these words, even the majority of the words are in French, it detects that the language name for this sentence is actually English, right? This person is English, or is writing in English. They just use the names of the restaurant review and Bon Appetit as part of their review. So it still does that. And whenever it takes this language detection, what it will do is it will identify the language name and the ISO code. So ISO code is when we're dealing with languages for Azure. If I want to identify what's English and what's Spanish, and this will come in when we're doing like translations. There's different ISO codes. EN is for English. ES is for Spanish. And then it gives you a score. And the score is how accurate it, how confident it is in that. So you can see that even in this one, there's all English words. It's 1.0 is yes, it's confident. This is what it is. These are all Spanish. 1.0, but this has a 0.9 because yes, it is very confident this is in English, but it does recognize that there are some French words, so it's not 100% confident in there. So this text analytics does allow us to take text and analyze, okay, what language is it in? What is the predominant language of that? And it can create some sort of issue. Let's say that there's a lot of emojis or something like that. One of the questions here is, what happens if, what does the score of non mean? This non would be if it has no idea whether you used emojis or it doesn't know what language this is in. It's not a recognized language. It will give you a non. So an example of this would be, let's say I was doing a Yelp website, right? And I wanted to see, what language my customers were reviewing my website in. Well, this would allow me to see the predominant language that my customers spoke in, had some code, and then it gives me a score there. So that'd be an example of this. Next one would be sentiment analysis. And that is where I will have some sort of text, or I can give it some text for it to analyze. And what it will do is it'll actually give me a sentiment of that. So like, is this frustrating? Is this, are you angry? Right now with Gmail or Grammarly, especially, if I'm using Grammarly and I'm typing something, it will give me a face as to, am I being kind or not, right? Am I sounding, it'll give me like, if I'm sounding super technical, it'll give me glasses, which is kind of rude, it's kind of nerdy, but like it's associating everybody who speaks technical as glasses and sort of nerdy, which I guess is actually pretty poor now that I think about it. But it'll give me that if I'm sounding very like smart-esque. And then if I'm sounding like, hey, hope everything's well, really glad to talk to you, it'll give me like a smiley face. Or if I'm saying like, hey, this was supposed to be done, I'm not understanding where the disconnect is, it'll give an angry face because it's saying the sentiment of your email, the sentiment of this text is frustrating or technical or happy or welcoming, something of that nature. So the sentiment analysis, Google is doing this right now, where it will give me a number between 0 and 1, where 1 is being a positive sentiment. And then scores that are like a 0.5 is just sort of a neutral or indeterminate. Like it's just, you just wrote some text. There's not really a tone there. And then closer to 0 is more frustrating and negative sentiment as well. So again, same sort of thing. Let's go with that Yelp review idea. If I want to know a sentiment analysis, I can see, are people frustrated or are they happy with, as they write a review, right? So we had dinner at this restaurant last night. First thing I noticed was how courteous the staff was. We're greeted in a friendly manner, taking the table right away. The table was clean, chairs were comfortable, food was amazing. And our dining experience at this restaurant was one of the worst I've ever had. The service was slow, the food was awful, and I'll never eat at this establishment again. The top one might be around 0.9, remembering 1 is positive. It's 0.9, right? It was a great review of this place, while the score, the second might be closer to 0.1 because it was negative and it was frustrating. And it was very, very frustrating. Now, if it does give it a 0.5, again, that indicates the sentiment of the text is indeterminate, meaning that it didn't necessarily have a tone or couldn't figure out, or insufficient phrasing. So it couldn't really discern the sentiment for that. So if it does say, that's a 0.5, then that is an issue, but we also have to pass in the language code. So let's say I passed in the wrong language code, then it would have a really hard time determining sentiment there. Or even if I passed in a language code of French and let's say that the text was French and the language code was English, then the service would return a 0.5 or precisely a 0.5, meaning that, if you get a 0.5, there's probably a disconnect of, you're trying to compare French text to English sentiment, something of that nature. Then there's key phrase extraction. So it's basically like Cliff Notes, right? So it can go through a text and then just give you the Cliff Notes of what's going on. Maybe if I wanted to create, there's like word clouds that are really popular right now, where you take words and how often they appear, like the larger the word becomes on this cloud. And so I want to take key phrase extraction. I want to take these words and I want to see what are common phrases or what are certain things. If there's a long piece of text, give me the meat of that, right? Give me what's really going on. What is the key phrase of this? And then lastly would be entity recognition. So what I can do is I can have an entity recognition and it will identify certain things like age and currency and dimension or percentage, right? So through that, I can detect certain entities to different, you can sort of think about it as like nouns or, like certain things. So I can utilize this in different areas, right? Or if I want to do something with time or, if I'm asking it to do something, let's say Alexa wasn't just voice and I could text in or do something like that. That'd be a great example, I guess, of entity recognition of, let's say I wanted to set up a haircut and my haircut had a thing that allowed me to text in and I could, in my sentence, I could put the date. It would be able to identify the date that I'm trying to talk and then go, or I'm wanting a haircut and then go to that date and send me that schedule. Or maybe I put my name and then it saves it as my name and it identifies me as an entity in there. Cool. Any questions on text analytics? Cool. So translator text is a service that translates text between more than 60 languages, which is a really cool thing. Now there's over 3,000 languages around the world. And so you can see that, when we're talking about inclusiveness and fairness, we still have a ways to go, right? Like if you're not one of the 60 predominant languages, you might think like 60 is a lot, but if you're not one of those, these tools aren't really available or made for you yet, right? And so when we're dealing with AI, Azure is constantly adding languages and constantly building, more languages. But let's say you do have, one of the niche languages that aren't part of these 60, that's hard, right? You're still having to adapt to another language in order to process or learn, or you have to learn English or learn Spanish or French or something that's not your native tongue. And so there's still this idea of inclusiveness of hopefully we can get to a point as a society, even with AI, that all languages are translatable, that we can translate every single language that somebody is speaking on this earth would be the idea. But right now, translator text is great in Azure. This is where, and it's interesting because AI systems must be able to understand not only the words, but the semantic context in which they're used, right? Spanish describes things differently than we do in English, right? And so like adjectives are after the noun. And so just understanding the semantic or something locally, or if you say something in a certain way in one area of the world, it might mean something different in another area of the world. And so the grammar rules, right? Formal versus informal and colloquialisms all need to be considered whenever we are dealing with these translator text, where it's not just a word for word translate like it used to be way back in the day with Google Translate, right? You would always get caught with your Spanish homework that you did Google Translate because it actually just translated word for word. It didn't actually put it in sentence format. And so we are still working at that with translator text. Or translator text is oodles ahead of where Google Translate used to be ages ago. So what it does is it supports, if I did want to use that, it supports text-to-text translation and the speech service, which enables speech-to-text and speech-to-speech translation. So what's cool is if I wanted to just translate text, just text, I could do that using the translator text or the speech service, which enables speech to text and speech to speech translation. So I talked about like me actually using this in real world. I was dealing with some students in Costa Rica, helping teach and run one of the data science programs there. And we ran into an issue where students didn't speak English. There's 3 students who didn't speak any English. And I recognized that there's a disconnect on Zoom, right? There's nothing that allows you to do any sort of translations. And it would be really great. Right now we have closed captioning. It'd be really great if we could utilize a tool like Azure to funnel in my speech, run it through Azure, and then give it a window of text in somebody's, native language. And so obviously that's not, I don't have that built yet, but I have it built to where I can say something and then it will run it through Azure. And then I can print out the text just on my local computer. I can print out the text in a translated language, right? So where I'm speaking in English through Zoom, it's going through Azure and it is translating it and then printing it out on my local machine. And so that's a great way of just a tool of how do we bring inclusivity and how do we bring everybody together? Business meetings would be much, much easier if you had, if on Zoom, I could just click closed captioning and maybe I don't speak Spanish, speak English, but there's captions, eventually it'd be nice if you translate word for word, but, we can settle with actual text right now. So again, it was super easy out of the box. Like you just read the documentation, understand how the endpoints work. And you're like, okay, this is super easy to where I can say something, it goes into my mic and it prints out, it listens until I'm done speaking, and then it prints out everything I said in another language, which is really kind of cool. Translator text does allow for profanity filtering. So if you did want to make sure that any of your text that was said did filter out profanity, it does allow that. So profanity levels are typically cultural specific. So you can, let's say there's something I would say in English that's really, really offensive to somebody else or something you can speak about or you can't speak about. You can allow that if it's doing that, it'll filter out, specific things if you wanted. And I could do selective translation. So you can tag content so that it isn't translated. So you might want to tag content like a brand name or a word or phrase that doesn't make sense when localized. So let's say I write like a Medium article to give a review on the M1 Mac from Apple. Well, if I'm doing that, maybe I want to expand my reach to where I want to run this through a translation to where I actually want it in Spanish and French as well. Well, with that word Apple, what I can do is I can identify and say, this is a brand. I don't want you to put, I don't want you to put the Spanish and the French word for Apple. I actually just want you to keep it as Apple because it's a brand name. So I can identify and say, these things I don't want you to translate. These are company names or business names or brand names. Or if I have, let's say my own company, that's not like a big global like Apple. And I want to make sure that my company name is that way, then I don't want it, changed. I can make sure that I set that up as well. Any questions on translator text? Is this stuff cool? I find this stuff so fascinating. That's just out of the box. You can build it super duper easy. So there is speech, speech to speech recognition. It's just an AI. So outside, immediately out of the box, we can do speech recognition. So things like turn off the lights. Will it rain today? This is really like your Alexas, your Bixby's, your Cortanas, your, Siris, a lot of these, different things you can do just right out of the box. And with this, I can either do with speech, I can do speech recognition and speech synthesis. So speech recognition is the ability to detect and interpret spoken input. So that is me saying, Alexa, turn on the lights, something like that. And the speech synthesis is the ability to generate spoken output. So that is, if I say, hey, what is the weather today? Then the ability of speech synthesis is for it to get that information and then speak it and say, the weather today is going to be 45 degrees, blah, 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 blah. Right. So speech recognition is taking in the speech that I say and understanding that. Speech synthesis is then speaking back something that you can generate spoken output. So Azure offers both speech recognition and synthesis abilities through the speech cognitive service. So with that, there's two APIs, the speech to text and then the text to speech, right? To where I can do speech to text. I now have text and I can generate that text and then have it be spoken. Again, that's what I'm using for that language tool for Zoom, right? I'm doing speech to text. I say something, gets a text, translate it. And then now the second part is need to get it to take that text and then speak it, right? That would be a cool tool. If I wanted to use speech, I can just use the a la carte speech in itself. But as always, if I wanted to have more than one thing, it would be cognitive service resource. So making sure that, or cognitive services, that's the bread and butter, that's everything. If I just wanted to use speech and nothing else, I would just use the speech. And the last one is Luis. That is the language understanding intelligence service. Now, this is going to be like the brains of a smart assistant. It's just commonly known as something called language understanding. So in order for me to do that, let's say I ask my smart assistant to turn off the lights. And that has a language understanding. It's understanding what I'm asking it to do, not just taking the speech to text, but really understanding what I'm asking it to do. What I have is I need three core concepts. I need utterances, I need entities, I need intents. So an utterance would be the actual statement I say. So if I say, blank, switch on the fan or switch the fan on, the utterance is an example of what a user might say. So with your application, must interpret. So for example, if I'm using home automation and I say, switch the fan on, the utterance is switch the fan on, or the utterance is turn on the light. The entity for my language understanding is what am I trying to target? When I'm saying that utterance, what am I referring to? For the first one, I'm referring to the fan. I want to do something to the fan, right? Or I want to do something to the light in the second one. So the thing that I'm trying to target, the thing that I'm trying to, do something to, that is what we call an entity. And there are different types of entities. There's 4 types. So there's machine learned. So entities that are learned by your model during training from context and the sample utterances you provide. So you would provide utterances and you would, sort of label, this would be the entity. There's a list. So entities that are defined as a hierarchy of lists and sublists. So for example, device might include sublists for light and fan. For each list entry, you can provide synonyms such as lamp for light. You think about like remote. Let's say that you had a tool that you could say like, hey, where's the remote? My wife calls it a clicker. I've never called it a clicker. I call it the remote, but you would be able to say synonym to where, if my wife is saying, hey, where's the clicker? And I'm saying, where's the remote? It understands that we're targeting the same thing, right? It's not 2 different entities. It's just targeting the same thing. Just they're synonyms for each other. I can also use regex. You guys are probably familiar with this when you dealt with like emails or passwords, but regex would be maybe if you had to put a certain number, or you would say, I need it, the first one, you had to input a phone number. Our regex would be like 0 to 9 for the first 3, -0 to 9 for the first 3, -0 to 9 for 4, meaning that all of these have to be numbers. Let's say you had to put in your phone number, or prescription number would be another example of this. There would be regex where like every time I refill my prescription, I have to put this number with a second number. And it would say, if I put something else, if I put a letter or something, it's not going to work because it has to be a number, right? And then I could do a pattern. So entities that are used with patterns to define complex entities that may be hard to extract from sample utterances. So if I wanted to create a pattern, I could do that as well. So with my intent, so that's my entities, right? What am I trying to target? And I can create lists of things I'm trying to target. Intents are, okay, what am I wanting to do to my entity, right? In this first case, I want to switch on, or I want to turn on the light. That is, I would define this intent as turn on, right? Although the utterance of switch on and turn on are different in the same way of lamp and light or clicker and remote, I can use a synonym and say switch on and turn on. They're the same sort of thing. That's the same intent. I'm wanting to turn it on, right? So it might look something like this. The intent would be a greeting, right? And so a related utterance might say like, hi, hello, good morning. Well, there's not necessarily any entities if you wanted, it's just a greeting where it says hello. Then I might have an intent of turn on, right? I want something to turn on. So a related utterance might be switch on the fan, turn on the light, turn on the lamp. And so what I'm trying to do, what the things I'm trying to identify would be a fan and my light. Those are my entities. And what I'm wanting to do, I want to turn them on. Checking weather, same sort of thing. And then maybe if I give something specific, like what's the weather in Seattle tomorrow, right? Then my entities for that are going to be Seattle because I'm giving it a location. And then tomorrow is a date time. So it's not today, it's tomorrow. What's the meaning of life? Is this thing on? Those are fun questions that, if you ask Siri to do something, it might, do something like that. Which we can, with this language processing, it's not always great. I've read something where a young girl asked an Alexa what to do, and it said to put a fork into a light socket. That was a story that came out. That's like not very far ago. So it's like, that's not great, right? Not that somebody programmed it that way, but somehow it learned and told a young girl to put a fork in a light socket, which was, hopefully that would electrocute you and you should not be doing that. So we have to be really, really obviously stringent on what we do with our language understanding. Now, if I wanted to use this tool, there's that video that Winter put in the chat. It's really cool. Language understanding can do a lot of things when it comes to like games and AR, VR. If you're trying to, really be into a game and it's sort of a choose your own destiny sort of thing, language understanding can be really great. So if you are creating that, you can use language understanding, but as always, you can use cognitive services, which also includes language understanding. So you can see that there's a lot of, cognitive services really includes almost everything. Okay, how we feeling? Do we need a break? Okay, I've got, that was a lot. So let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break. My break is on fire, same. Let's go ahead and let's give you a 20-minute break. We'll come back here at 2:30. And then all we have left is we're going to talk about conversational AI. It's just maybe, I can't remember how many slides it is. Not very many. It is, what is happening here? Let me go ahead and pause the recording. Cool. So the recording is being made. You guys can see my screen. Now let's finish up. Let's talk about conversational AI. And we've just got 12 more slides and we're on the home stretch, my friends. So conversational AI is something that companies are starting to use more and more and more because it is a way that they can efficiently answer the same question over and over and over again for their users in order for them to kind of get the most accurate response for their users, but without having to employ somebody to answer the same things over and over. So typically what an organization does is they have support information and answers to a frequently asked question. So like an FAQ, right? And that can be accessed through their web or dedicated app. And so what they can do is that that means that the answers to specific questions are hard to find sometimes, right? Finding that FAQ sheet can be a little bit more difficult and troublesome. And so it's not a great user experience. So what these organizations will do is either have their support personnel overloaded with just basic questions through phone calls, emails, text messages, or social media and other channels, asking the same thing over and over and over and over again. Like, how do I do a return? What's the return policy? XYZ. And so what they've done is actually taken these frequently asked questions and turn them into utilizing something called conversational AI. So they're turning to AI solutions to make use of these sort of AI agents, so commonly known as bots, right? So which are sort of the first line of automated support through the range of channels that we use to communicate. So maybe I just want to see how much my bill is. I can do that quickly, and somebody doesn't have to look up my account and do that. I can use a bot, give it information, comes back and says, this is my due date and how much is due. And then maybe that's the end of my interaction, and that's great. It's really, really quick on my end from a user, but it also alleviates some of the stress and sort of traffic going to your employees as well. So these bots are designed to interact with users in sort of a conversational manner. And they can do that multiple ways. Typically, when I think of a bot, I think of like a chat bot, right? Or like this chat window, like you're seeing to the right. But that's not the only way we can use a conversational bot. We can do them through social media. We can do them through emails. We can do them through voice calls. So there's tons of different ways that we can create these bots and sort of deploy them onto different platforms and different arenas of technology. That way they can use the same thing in order to utilize however my user is trying to contact me, again, whether it's through a voice call, for an email or social media platform. So the way that a conversational AI, so the way conversations typically take form of, or the way this works is a conversation between a conversational AI and a user is they take form of messages exchanged in terms. And so one of the most common kinds of conversational exchange is a question followed by an answer, right? So what is my bill? When is my due date for my bill? And this pattern forms the basis for many user bots, can often be based on existing FAQ documentation to implement this kind of solution you need. So let's say that I'm a company and, you know, everybody's continues to call me and my phones are ringing off the hook of a lot of the same questions because my FAQ document is poorly sort of visible. And so what I would do is I could make this bot based off of my FAQ. So I've already done all the work and I've already created this FAQ. I can make a bot based off of that. And the knowledge base would be sort of the question and answering pairs. So I create this thing called a knowledge base of what do I want my bot to know? And then I would then employ that bot service and say, take in this knowledge base, go in and, you know, answer my questions. And this knowledge base usually has some built-in natural language processing model to help enable questions that can be phrased in multiple ways to be understood with the same semantic meaning. So one thing to point out with our Luis, right, is it would allow you and allow the machine to interpret what you're trying to say, sort of the same way when we were talking about utterances, right? And so when I'm doing this, when I'm creating a user support bot, I'm going to use a combination of two technologies. I'm going to use a Q&A maker. So that's my knowledge base, my question and answer maker. That is a cognitive service. That is the service that we're using, right? So if the question is like, what would you use to create what are the two services needed for a conversational AI? It'd be a Q&A maker and it'd be an Azure bot service. The Q&A maker is the cognitive service that allows you to create and publish a knowledge base with built-in natural language processing capabilities. And the Azure bot service is the service that provides a framework for developing, publishing, and managing bots on Azure. So the Q&A maker is the knowledge base, and the bot service is what we basically deploy for my users to interact with. And then it just checks questions against my knowledge base. So for the Q&A maker, if we're creating that resource, there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can do it from generating, I can create my knowledge base from my existing FAQ document or webpage. There's also predefined chit chat data source. So there's also predefined data that I can purchase or use or download. That is basically like predefined, like, hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you? It's already built out for you. So you don't have to go in and build some of that. So you can import a predefined chit chat data source. Or also I can just do I can enter and edit it manually, right? So let's say I'm a brand new company and I don't have an FAQ document. I can create that within my knowledge base and it already exists there. Now, typically, whenever we're dealing with these Q&A makers, it's going to be a combination of all three, if we're honest. Like if a company has a FAQ, it's going to upload that for sure. We might use some of this pre-built chit chat service. And then there might be some things that maybe we start noticing after our bot is deployed. Okay, it's taking care of a big portion of the basic questions, but then we are getting my people are still getting this one unique question over and over and over and over again, or maybe it's a new service I've added and they want to know the price of that or something of that nature. I can go in and edit that and enter that in manually because it wasn't part of my FAQ. It's not part of the chit chat, but maybe that's something that my company has moved towards. So I could typically our knowledge base is going to be a combination of all three of those. And they can also be assigned alternative phrasing. So which helps us sort of consolidate the questions with the same meaning. So for example, you might include a question like, where's your head office location? So in my knowledge base, that is it. But I can anticipate a different way this question could be asked by adding an alternative phrase, such as, where is your head office located? So those are, asking the same question, they just are said different ways. So I can anticipate that to make my bot more robust and sort of continue to further anticipate questions. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, what this does is it cuts down on how much you have to pay for actual employees, right? If a lot of these questions are being answered, then you need less people to sit and man the phones. Then with the Azure bot service, this service provides the framework for developing, publishing, and managing our bots. So basically, once I've created my knowledge base, I can deliver it to users through a bot. So I have my Q&A. Here's my knowledge base, my Q&A maker. I use my bot and then I identify what source or what platform I want it to be deployed on, whether it is a chat bot on my actual website, whether it's through an email so they can email me and I can send them something back, or if it's on the phone, same sort of thing of, whenever I am calling in for a prescription, it just has me input my number of my prescription on the phone. It looks it up. It asks, is this correct? Yes. And then it says, okay, my refill submission has been accepted or, taken in. They'll call me if there's any sort of issues. Then I get a call later on that it's been filled. So that's just a bot service that's already created. The pharmacists themselves do not have to sit on the phone and look me up and look up my number. It can just automatically be generated there. And then if there's any issues, then they call me, which really cuts down on them having to be on the phone, and they can help other people or fulfill orders faster. Cool. So that's conversational AI. We build a Q&A, a knowledge base. We employ a bot service, and then we can deploy that on multiple different platforms. Any questions on conversational AI? Any questions on any of this? Cool. So we have two options. There's a great knowledge check game sort of thing. It's called Kahoot, to where basically, if you guys have access to two different monitors, you can't really just do it on your phones. If you're on your phone, I'm sorry, it won't necessarily make sense, or you can't do it. I think it messes up. But where we can do sort of a quiz, it is like 40 questions, but it's a quiz to play and see, how much you retain. If you don't want to do that, I understand that this is a very, very information intensive thing. It's okay if we don't play it. I'm going to give that up to you guys. If you guys in the chat can say that you want to play it or not. If you don't want to play it, if you're like, hey, I'm actually pretty done, that's okay. Like, I get it. It's also a lot of information for me to give. So I'm okay not playing. But I'm also okay to play because it is fun. So in the chat, if you guys want to put, if you want to play or not, or what I'll do is I'm going to create a poll so that way you don't have to, okay. Okay, so I just launched my poll, so you can take it if you want. Or about 50%. There's a poll out there. It's very close. Yeah, sorry. Oh, we got one more person who needs to vote, and they could be the deciding factor, which is fascinating. Oh, okay. So unfortunately, thanks for voting. Majority is their brain is fried. That's okay. I fully get that. So no worries on that. We will not play it. It is it's more so just to walk through the different things that we've learned today, but it is quite long. So I fully get it. If it was just like 10 minutes, I wouldn't even have offered that, but it is, like a 30-minute, 20-minute game. It's like 38 questions and it can get kind of like, brain dead. So, okay. So we won't play that. That's fine. So we're actually just going to wrap up the workshop here. So now next steps, what are we going to do? Now is when you go get certified. My biggest suggestion is right now, this is 30% off everything. It's been 30% off for a very long time. So I don't know how much longer it's going to be. I thought it was only gonna be like a month, but it's been up for like 5 or 6 months. But this is a great test prep training. I'll put this in the chat. This is not from us. We don't get paid or anything like this. It's just a great tool and resource. But what this is test prep training is where you can actually buy a practice exam with the 30% off. I think it comes out to like $8.30 or $8.30 or $8.40. I really suggest this, especially if you, as you're preparing, if you're going to spend $50, you might as well spend $8 more because you're saving $50 and just, it's a way to assure that you're going to get the certification. The way it looks like is this, like if I am here, I already have all these purchased. So if I were to take this test, it gives you different test sets. So it really, sort of simulates if you were taking the actual exam. It gives you a set of questions. You can go through the different ones and it has multiple questions to where I can do practice mode. I can start my test. And then it says select 2 tasks that can be performed by using a computer vision service. So let's say I were to say, recognize handwritten text. Nope, that doesn't work. It's red, right? But I can detect faces. Okay, yes, that's true. I can detect faces and I can train custom image classification model. And then it tells me where it is located. So it's a way that if you are still learning, you can sort of go through these questions. It's questions similar to like what you're going to have during the certification exam, but it allows you to not only, okay, let's say you got it wrong, you can go here and then you go to these learn modules and you can read more about what custom vision allows you to do, right? So this is where that was able to do, or this is where these answers were found. So you can do that. It has 60 and it has an hour and a half, just like the exam. It's a great tool for $8. It's a lifetime subscription. So it's not like if you in 2 years want to get recertified, these are continually, updated and added questions if there is something to be added. But you can continue to use these sort of for life. And they have them for a bunch, the AZ-900, the DEP-900, AI-900, and then the more advanced ones as well. So my encouragement is pay the extra $8 because then it solidifies and you'll know, and you'll go in with more confidence of, okay, I know this material, I can do this really simply. Cool. So now what you do is, my encouragement is, here's where you would sign up for the exam. Let me put this in the chat as well. So this is where you sign up. You're going to schedule with Pearson VUE. I'm not going to click it because a bunch of my personal information comes up, but you'll click the schedule with Pearson VUE. And what it's going to do is you're going to set up an account with Pearson VUE and it's going to have your address and everything like that. That's why I'm not clicking on it, because my address will show. But what you'll do is you'll create that application and you'll set up the time you want to do it. Now, because it's proctored and somebody has to watch it with you, sometimes it does take a little bit longer. So like maybe you don't want to do the day of, you don't want to wake up and be like, I'm going to take it today. You might not be able to get a time. Usually about 24 hours is good enough for like a scheduling purpose, but I'd give yourself, like I'd schedule it a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance, just to make sure it works with you and you know it's a time that works. Also, my encouragement to you, you guys have just graduated the boot camp or you've already been graduates, or I don't know your situation. You just got a ton of information. My encouragement would be take a time 2 to 3 weeks out, because we got so much information. You're like fairly close to being able to take this. Find a time 2 to 3 weeks out and schedule this exam. As soon as I give you the coupon code, schedule this exam. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is you will sit and you will have waited all day and you'll learn something. So you'll have learned something cool, but it's sort of a waste of 6 hours, right? If you don't end up taking this or don't get certified. And so if you have the financial means to get certified and pay the $50, I would encourage you to go ahead and sign up. And also it makes, typically it encourages people to sign up or to like really study this. Because, you know, you already have some buy-in because you paid for it, sort of thing. So that would be my suggestion. The way it works is you schedule a time, and at the very end, as you're going to check out, it'll ask for a coupon code, and then I will give you a coupon code, and then that's when it'll take the $50 off of that. Talking about the vouchers, they do expire in June. So it's not just like good for forever. It does expire in June. And I will be sending you a unique code tomorrow that you can use. And it'll be specifically to use if you share it and your friend uses it. Unfortunately, they've used your code. So don't share that with people, and you can sign up for the AI-900. Again, want to make sure you schedule in advance because it is remote proctored. And another bit of information is typically whenever you take the exam, my encouragement would be to take it somewhere that's not necessarily where you typically like study. And the reason I say that is if you are like, I'm not like a sticky notes person, or just even really like a paper person. But if you are, they're going to ask you to move a ton of stuff on your desk. And so, you know, one of our coworkers who took it had like a dog toy on the floor, and they made her move it. Or, you know, my boss is a big sticky note person, and so their desk has to like fully be cleaned. So typically what I say is like, if you have the ability to go to like a kitchen table or go somewhere that you normally don't have anything. So that way the proctoring experience is just much easier, because you can be like, look, I'm at like a random table or something. There's no TV, there's no iPad or anything that I can look at to cheat. Some proctors are really, really, really intense, like dog toys, get them out. And then others are much more chill. So it sort of just depends on your proctor as well. And also I'll be sending you a document in the email. I'll send you a document along with the voucher code that also lays out all the different pieces of what you should do. Other than that, thank you so much. Let me know when you get certified via Discord or email. I'll be emailing you. So please let me know. I love to celebrate that. My team loves to celebrate that. And we hope that this is great for your journey. I know that there's a couple of questions in the chat. Somebody asked, I worked with Amazon for a few years with extensive experience in AWS. I do not have a cert though. And I wonder if when job hunting, does experience get overlooked if there's no certificate attached? It would totally depend on that. Depends on who's doing the job hunting, in the sense of, I don't know what you did at AWS. Were you actually in the dev world, or were you doing something different with AWS? The one thing I would say is, from the cert perspective, is recruiters often don't know different things about the job, right? They're just like promoting a job. And so recruiters trying to find somebody who's AWS certified. So even though you worked for AWS in X capacity, it might, you know, somebody who doesn't know that, they might see that cert and say like, oh, this person knows, even though you probably know more than even like your cloud practice, like AWS cloud practitioner, like certified person does. They might say, oh, because of that, you know, they might overpass you that way. So I could see that. Now, if it was somebody who was aware of AWS and aware of, or just actually in the industry or dev, or, you know, you were able to speak on those tools, it might, you know, not be passed up. But if it's just a recruiter, that might be an issue. So that's why certifications sort of play a larger role, and why getting certified does help you stand out. Great question though. Any other questions? Well, all right, friends. Well, thank you for this. Thank you for coming and seeing these. There is another one tomorrow. It's the AZ-900. That one's much more comprehensive with the actual cloud itself. So, you know, feel free to do that. My focus though would also be to, I will answer your question as well, Winter. My encouragement would be to pick, we offer a bunch of these, pick one or two, like space it out. Don't take all three this month would be my biggest encouragement. Solidify yourself in AI if that's something you're interested in, and then get certified in that and then take on the other one. These are free and they're always going to be free for alumni. We do them every month. So it's not like you're missing out and this was your only chance. You can always come to them. So that would be my encouragement.